Joining me now is investigative journalist and author of Be Careful of Who You Love, Inside the Michael Jackson Case, Diane Diamond, and attorney Areva Martin. I'm glad to see both of you here today. I have been so curious about this headline and this ruling ever since I saw it. But let me begin with you, Diane, because you actually, you first broke the news about accusations of an inappropriate relationship between Michael Jackson and a young boy back in 1993. I wonder, based from then to now, I mean, so many years have passed, what was your reaction to Friday's ruling reviving the ability to bring this to court?
Well, you know, I wasn't surprised because so many states now have waived their old statute of limitations. And so I know the two men's attorney, Vince Finaldi, who is a bulldog, and I knew he wasn't going to give up. And you know what? I think it comes down to this, Laura. If the Catholic Church is responsible for what its priests did, and if the Boy Scouts is responsible for what their scouts did, that's what this appellate court ruled, that the same standard should apply to the businesses of Michael Jackson, even though he owned them solely himself.
Areva, I want to unpack that because people might hear this and say, wait a second, they can now go back to court and they can sue the Jackson estate again, or that he can be tried post-mortem. That's not the case, as Diane's talking about and reminding us. This is about the corporations. Can you just unpack a little bit for us, Areva, as to why there is a distinction and whether the estate can be challenged?
Well, what we know, Laura, is that the estate is not a part of these lawsuits that are being revived. These lawsuits are against two entities that Michael Jackson was the sole shareholder, sole proprietor of, and one was the Michael or MJJ Ventures, and one was MJJ Productions. And what the court is allowing for these two cases, as you stated in your opening, both cases had been dismissed, the 2013 and 2014 cases based on the statute of limitations, and now this new law that California has, which allows individuals to file a case for sexual abuse that otherwise might have been barred by the statute. So that's a huge victory for the plaintiffs in this case. And then the Court of Appeals saying that the lower court got it wrong by determining that these corporations did not owe a duty of care to these individuals. Now, I think it's interesting to note, Laura, the appellate court says there is no comparable case law to cite. I think the decision about whether these corporations that are solely owned by Michael Jackson, and the court goes on to talk about how he could have restrained himself, how he could have conducted himself in a different way so as not to cause the harm to these two men, young boys at the time. I don't think this is a settled decision at all. You have two lower courts dismissing these cases. You have an appellate court saying, no, lower court, particularly on the merits of the liability of the corporations, you got it wrong, sending it back to the lower court. So whatever the outcome is, if this case does move forward to trial, we should expect to see continued appellate court litigation about this issue of the responsibility of these companies.
I mean, Diane, you're nodding, and one of the reasons for a lot of people to be leaning in even more on instances of cases and allegations as they are right now is because through the Me Too era in particular, society realized that people delayed their reporting. They had a very different notion of what a quote-unquote true victim was, how they would operate and beyond. And it's causing some people to look at this case perhaps with a new, fresh set of eyes. But you actually were in the court when one of the plaintiffs, Wade Robson, testified. But he testified, remember, in defense of Michael Jackson, saying that he had not been a victim of molestation or anything inappropriate. So given that he now is a plaintiff in this, are you surprised that when he came forward with a different story and it continues to have legs today, even with the appellate court?
Well, you know, let's go way back to 1993 when he was a little boy, and I kept hearing his name come up over and over and over from people who worked within MJJ Productions and MJJ Ventures. I think maybe Ventures wasn't even started yet, but in my book, you mentioned my book, I write about many of the employees at MJJ Productions who told me, you know, we were lavishing gifts on Jimmy Safechuck and on Wade Robson and their mothers and anything they wanted. And we were, so this is the crux of their claim, that people within that entity aided and abetted Michael Jackson in his alleged molestation of them. And it doesn't surprise me that it took them so long to come forward or that the story changed.
I mean, certainly I've prosecuted delayed sexual assault cases. Ariva, I know you're nodding as well. You've had your fair share in thinking about how this oftentimes can unfold. I will note, of course, that Michael Jackson was not found criminally liable for the behavior that he was accused of having committed. And actually, the attorney representing the estate of Michael Jackson said this, they, quote, remain fully confident that Michael is innocent of these allegations. Now, the cases, as you know, which were consolidated in the appeals court, are now going to go back to the trial courtroom. And I'm wondering about how many instances, many civil trials often end or even end before they begin, Ariva, in a settlement. Do you expect there to be that outcome here?
Well, clearly, this kind of victory where you've had a case or cases dismissed twice, and yet they are revived. If you talk about incentive for defendants to settle a case, I think, if there was ever a poster child for an incentive, this is what we're looking at here. But Laura, as you just stated, both of these men, not just one, but both of them have made prior inconsistent statements. They both have stated under oath that Michael Jackson never molested them, never assaulted them. So that is going to be, if these cases do move forward to trial, if there isn't a settlement, that's going to be a big issue, I think, for a lot of jurors who are looking at this. And, Michael Jackson is a beloved celebrity in his death. So reconciling what we know about the delayed response, how victims oftentimes suppress what has happened to them and then come forward later, juxtaposing that with these prior inconsistent statements. I don't think it's a slam dunk on either side.
Diane Diamond, Ariva Martin, something tells me this is not the end of even this conversation. Thank you both for being here.